So Rebecca and I are just going to talk for a little while and then hopefully leave lots and lots of time for questions. We'll first of all say a little bit about our career histories, both before and since we've worked as a job share. Then we'll tell you some of the best things about being in a job share. Rebecca will tell you a little bit about that, and I'll chip in my experiences as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do to make a job share work. So we'll just cover off those three things and then open up for questions after that. So I'm going to start with a little bit about my career history and then I'll hand over to Rebecca. So I was somebody who didn't have a really clear plan when I came out of university. So I spent a bit of time kind of traveling and working overseas, trying to find my feet, and then decided to do a bit of further study. I'd studied economics and did a master's in economics, and then decided when I did my master's that I really had a taste for economics, not so much after the first degree for some reason, but went into an economics job at PwC Economics Consulting to start with, which was lots and lots of fun. I learned loads, progressed quite fast, but also worked really, really long hours and kind of ultimately didn't feel totally at one with PwC as an organisation, didn't completely motivate me. So after a few years there, I decided to move to the civil service, out of a kind of wish for a slightly slower pace in my professional life and a bit of a life outside of work, but also kind of a social motivation, desire to do something with a little bit more, I hoped, positive impact and kind of serve government. Once I joined DWP, I did a few roles working in labour markets, universal credit, that sort of thing. Several years as a grade 7, interspersed with maternity leaves. So I kind of felt like I had a bit of a slowdown of my career while I took time out to have kids, rotated through different roles. And then when I came back from my second maternity leave, I was feeling a bit directionless, not sure really where I was going, not feeling a sense of progress, not enjoying things so much. And that was when I went on the Crossing Thresholds course, which for me was really, really amazing experience. I don't think I need to, apart from maybe Rebecca, sell it to anyone here because I assume that if you're in this session, that means that you've done the course. So, but that was really, really amazing for me. And I was one of the lucky people who kind of found that visualization session that you do at the start kind of really clarifying for me in terms of what is it that I want, what am I looking for? I had this kind of image of myself in an office with big windows looking out at the countryside, and made some significant life decisions straight away afterwards, moved out of London, moved down to Lewes where I grew up, and went down to 3 days a week. 3 days a week for me, as a kind of individual, I was working in a grade 7 job at the time, it was really, really hard. I'd found dropping down to 4 days a week really easy, but for 3 days trying to deliver a kind of job really on my own was pretty stressful. Like coming in and there's already kind of 2 days backlog of emails. Can't remember. No, I was probably working Wednesdays to Fridays, and just trying to cover it all off. It was a lot. So then a job opportunity came up in labour markets where I'd worked previously, which I thought looked really, really interesting. I really wanted to do the job, but I knew I couldn't do it. It was a grade 6 job. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. So I went to talk to the recruiting manager and I said, look, I'm really interested in your job. I'd really like to do this, but I only work 3 days a week. That's how long I'm going to work. And basically, are there any other part-timers interested who I might be able to job share with? So the recruiting manager was really supportive. He was like, I really want you to apply for this. Just apply and we'll see what happens. So I kind of took a punt, applied for the role. And then, again, really very supportive. He sort of offered me the role and said, look, let's advertise for a job share partner. So that was where our fortunes aligned, and I'll hand over to Rebecca now really, but that was the kind of circumstances that Rebecca and I came together. Rebecca, you might want to sort of rewind a little bit, then bring us back up to that point and go forward from there.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy, and thanks. Hello, everyone. It's really, really great to be here. Thanks for the introduction, Shada. Yeah, so how we kind of got to the point where we were a job share. I'd been in at DWP since 2006. So I started as a fast streamer on the government economics fast stream. Straight from university. I kind of went to university, did an economics degree because that's what I was kind of good at A level. And I thought, okay, I didn't have anyone else in my family who'd been to university, let alone kind of gone to have a career in economics. So it's like, what do you do with an economics degree? I don't know, let's join the government economic service. It's like really interesting things. The type of things at university, the questions that you kind of you take away and you think about, and actually think about working on that and apply that seemed really exciting to me. So I joined, and then after a year I went and worked for an NDPB called Personal Accounts Delivery Authority, which is now Nest, which is now where we are now. So kind of gone full circle. And I came back and I did a master's and did various economics jobs. I did a few policy roles in there as well. But really, DWP is a department with tons of data. It's a really, really great place to kind of learn the ropes of being an economist and being an analyst. And did lots of interesting policy work on pensions, labour markets, universal credit. And I hadn't had the consultancy experience at the time I did, but in the forecasting teams, especially one of the teams I worked in, where you're working on the budget rounds, you're working till 9, 10 o'clock at night, really, really quite long hours and quite stressful. And I had my first child. I was on maternity leave, and I just started to feel like, how am I going to do this job, which I really enjoy and love, but it's draining. It takes so much out of me. And I've got this other job now that I also love, and I also want to spend a lot of time doing with my daughter. So I didn't really know what was going to happen and what I was going to do. You just think you're just going to have to juggle it, aren't you? And it's not going to lie, it's still a juggle now, even in part-time, but it's definitely much easier. And just as I was about to come back from maternity leave, thankfully DWP had quite a good system of sending around job adverts and kind of temporary promotions around people that are on maternity leave. So I'm really, really thankful for that, because something then came to my personal inbox and said that in the labour markets, looking for a job share with Tammy open on temporary promotion. So at this point I was a grade 7. Didn't know if I was quite ready to go to grade 6, but I had to give it a go. It was just worth, and it was, see how it goes. It's a temporary thing. It's a year. If it doesn't work out, can go and do something else. But you kind of, yeah, it seemed like the perfect timing for me. And I'd known Tammy, so we'd worked together a little bit previously on universal credit. So, and I was doing the modelling, and Tammy was doing the policy analysis work. And I just remember thinking, she's really good. This is good. That will be fine, because I'm sure I can work. I didn't know Tammy that well, but just kind of goes to show, like, the connections and the networks that you build up throughout your career really matter, and the impressions that you leave on people. And that just kind of gave me confidence, made me feel really excited about going in for the job. And luckily I got it. So that was kind of the start, that first year of how we kind of joined. And that was back in 2016 now, wasn't it? So yeah, 8 years ago, and still going strong. That's probably enough on our career history. Should we talk about some of the things that are great about being in a job share? Do you want me to kick off on this, Tammy, or is there any more? Yeah. So we've been in job share since 2016, as I said. Had that temporary kind of stint together, and then Tammy really wanted to move over to trade, and Brexit had just happened. And I guess one of the great things about being in a job share is it's probably something I would never have done, but it does push you out of your comfort zone sometimes and opens up lots of opportunities for you as well. So with kind of Tammy's lead, we went over to trade, and we got a permanent grade 6 position over there. And I really feel quite genuine about, I think, because of the relationship with Tammy and how much we learned from each other, I'm sure, that we've progressed probably quite a lot quicker in our career than we might have done otherwise as individuals. And so that's one of the best things about it for me, is you have that person to learn from and build your kind of career with together, and that's really so valuable, and you get so many insights that you know, it would take a lot longer to get on your own. And then the confidence that you get as well from having that. So that there are a couple of things, I guess. Whenever we go into, we've moved around as a job share a couple of times now. So we moved as a job share into trade, and we've just moved as a job share into working at Nest, which is really has been brilliant, because now, like, showing that we can move outside the civil service as a job share as well shows how successful it can be. But one of the things we always say is two heads are better than one, and a lot of the things we're working on, you know, especially in the civil service, is so complex, and so, you know, there's so much riding on the decisions that we're making, and the advice to ministers, it really counts, and that's what's going to inform their decisions. And having like two kind of people working on it and working through those complex problems really adds a lot of value. And I think we've got the job we've got now is because we've been able to kind of prove that and show you're going to get more than the value of our whole, you know, we're just so worth the money. So hopefully we're proving that right. We've only been there 3 months, but we've passed the probation so far. There's some questions in the chat. Should I have a quick look through these and see if there's any that we want to jump to? Do you want to take any of these now,
Should we do the questions after we've done the little...
Yeah, keep the questions coming, and we'll come back to them. Yeah, so anything you want to add, Tammy?
Sorry. Well, I have to ask Shada's permission every time I unmute. Yeah, so just in terms of the best bits, I think one thing that is just so valuable for me is just having Rebecca there, in terms of just the mutual support. You know, when things are tricky, there is someone else that is having that exact same experience that you're having. And it's just great to be able to have a little bit of an unload. It's, you know, there's not always someone that you can do that with at work. It's not always appropriate, or people just don't quite, you know, get what's going on. But it's really wonderful having someone who's got the exact same things happening to them, and, you know, you can do a bit of a reality check and just kind of yeah, support one another. And then the other thing I think is just kind of, Rebecca sort of alluded to it, but being able to do roles like the roles that we've been doing, I couldn't have done those roles as a part-timer. When we were working in trades with Shada, we had a team of sort of 35, 40 people, and there was just stuff happening all the time, constant firefighting, just absolute masses of work. And you just couldn't do that on 3 days a week. So it's really kind of opened up doors in that way. Okay, I'll just quickly then move on to things that I think are important if you're thinking about being in job share partnership, the most important things to do to make it work. And I'll give my top 3 things and then see if Rebecca's got anything that she wants to add. So I think the first thing that is really important is the respect and trust that you have with your job share partner. So I think Rebecca and I have been really lucky. And as Rebecca said, I think when I sort of, you know, my mum was actually job share as a teacher back in the 1980s. She was probably one of the earliest job share partnerships. I think it'd always been there in my mind. You do see job share partnerships in the civil service. So I'd had like a half eye open all the way through my earlier time in DWP of like, is there anyone out there maybe I could work with one day? And honestly, there were not that many people who I thought, oh, I could pair with. But I remember when Rebecca said she was interested in applying for the job share partnership, I was like, oh yes, that's someone that I could. And I think the respect and the trust is just really, really important, to know you've got that, so that you can work really seamlessly, and and you can step away and just kind of leave things in your job share partner's hands, without feeling like someone is kind of carrying the load. And then that links to the second thing, which I think is just that both of you need to have a kind of all-in attitude of mutual support. And that applies both to kind of substantive stuff like decisions that you've taken in the context of work. So, you know, if Rebecca's said, you know, given a clear steer on something, I'm just gonna hold the line, whatever. If there's some little quibble, then it'll be Rebecca that I'll talk to. It wouldn't be someone in the team. And that for that you need that respect and trust. But also, you know, just looking out for one another. Like, has someone put in a really awkward meeting first thing on a Monday when I know Rebecca's going to be coming in and not have any context? Just sort of like a protective attitude towards one another, trying to be like, oh, I know Rebecca's going to find this quite difficult to deal with because maybe she wasn't in that meeting, so let me try and make sure I've sorted that before I leave on Friday. That kind of thing, looking out for each other. Or, you know, someone's got, you know, Rebecca's got to leave early because there's a parents' evening or something, just being really clear and looking out for each other. I'm going to try my absolute best to do that, and I know Rebecca is going to as well. And then the third thing, and probably the most important, is the communication. So Rebecca and I have one day of overlap a week. And then we have one handover now. It was a bit different when we were back in trades, but we have one handover on a Friday where I finish up and then Rebecca starts on the Monday. So just to be really clear, Rebecca works on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and I work Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. But the more information we can give one another about everything that has happened, then the more smoothly the job share is going to work. So we've had various models of how we do this over time. When we first started working together, then I would always sort of sit down at the end of the week, usually on the train home on a Friday night, and just kind of write everything down in an email, starting from scratch. And it was actually something that I would kind of dread a little bit at the end of the week, because and just think, oh, I've got to do the handover. Since then, we've moved to a bit more of a kind of just sort of taking notes of all the time about everything as we're going. So we have a OneNote now where we just sort of like, I have a bit of a stream of consciousness, and I think we know each other quite well now, so we can interpret quite garbled stuff that we've written down. And then also a bit of just a summary of like, these are the key things that need doing. So yeah, so top three things: respect and trust, all-in attitude of mutual support, and communication is from me. And Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything that you think is also really important that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, I've been in other job share partnerships as well. So there was a bit of time when when I was on my second maternity leave, and Tammy was in a job share partnership with someone else, and I came back and was in another one temporarily, and it worked okay. It probably didn't work quite as well. And I think the trust thing that Tammy talked about was really key there. I think but you have to be open-minded going into these things, and you have to be flexible, and you have to be prepared for a bit of give and take. And I think, you know, when you're used to just working on your own and you own something and you fully control it, but it's actually really great letting go of some of that control and sharing that with someone. But you just have to be open to that as well. And you do have to be willing to listen and to compromise and hear other points of view as well. And so just having like a self-awareness about you as well is really, really important. So just to add that, like, there's a bit of a mindset as well as the practicalities, I think, that are really important that go along with this.
Okay, should we hand back to you, Shada, to pick some questions for us to answer?
Absolutely. We've got so many questions. Thank you so much for talking us through all of that. I think you actually have answered a few already, but I'll start from scratch. So how do you apply for a job when you're a job share? Do you move together? How does that work?
Shall I do
Go.
this one? We could maybe take turns. So in my experience, when we've applied for jobs, the recruiting manager has to make it up a bit as they go along. They don't have a model in mind for how to deal with it. But every time we've tried to do it, they've really kind of tried to make the process work. So it's about engaging. If you're already a job share partnership, it's about engaging with the recruiting manager, saying, look, this is our situation. We want to apply for this together. How do we make this work? Do you want us to do a sort of personal statement together or separate work? Just sort of working with them, really, because it's very rare that some process is going to start that's already designed around job share partnership applications. And generally, I think the situation that you're in that context is one where you're sort of basically hoping it's going to work out that the two of you are both top of the pile, and that you don't get which whenever we've been aware in a kind of graded process, like when we applied for the job at Trade, we know we were the top, like both of us were kind of top of the pile in terms of the interview process. I think if you're not, I have heard of occasions where job share partnerships have applied for jobs and sort of one of them has come out top and one of them hasn't, and they don't get the job together. So we've been lucky that where we've tried to make it work, it's worked out, but usually it just requires a bit of communication and practical arranging and working through. So when we applied to Nest, they just sort of set up a process for us where we had individual interviews, one together, some bits we did apart, some bits we did the same together.
I was going
like, sorry.
I was going to ask if there was an element in the civil service where you had joint interviews, or was it always separate? Always separate.
In the civil service, it was separate.
Sorry, Rebecca.
So to answer that, in the civil service, it was separate. We're in the private sector now, we did most of it separate, but we did have a joint interview as well, which worked quite well because then they get to see the kind of dynamics. But the civil service kind of recruitment process is a little bit more rigid, I guess I'd say. I was just going to say about if you're applying for a job and you're not already in a job share partnership, how you might go about it. And Tammy's actually got a very good example of that, because it's exactly what Tammy did, where if you're interested in a job, go and speak to the recruiting manager and say, I really want to do this, but I'd like to do it part-time. Would you be open, for that, and recruiting a job share partner? And it is more expensive in terms of headcount, but there's so much value from a job share. And I think managers realize that now, and they have that, lots of evidence that that's the case, and you can use us if you need to, for example. But it's usually something that I find it's a different business in the civil service are very, very open to, and we're the first job share partnership in the organisation that we work for now. But again, that is changing in the private sector, and as you kind of see more and more examples out there, it has to be considered. HR are going to consider it, and I think it's probably have to be really kind of tight budget things for them to say no, usually, because the jobs that you're doing are going to be interesting and really valuable, and they'll really want you to do it, so they're trying to accommodate you.
Thank you, Rose. The next question is a little bit about what a job share looks like in terms of hours. So does this mean that you're employed for more than 37 hours, and is it therefore more expensive for the employer? And is it always the same formula, so it's 0.6 FTE per person, or could that change as well?
Yeah, well, I just kind of answered that. So in our case, we are a bit more expensive because we overlap for a day. So we're 1.2. Doesn't always have to be like that. So there are models where someone might be due 3 days, and the other person does 2 days. I think you kind of can get different combinations, and it really depends on the individual and their circumstances and what they're after, and obviously on the hiring manager and what they're able to get the budget for. So it's worth kind of asking for what you want as your ideal that you've agreed with your job share partner, and then seeing what you can negotiate.
Thank you. The next question is more about practicalities of being in a job share. So how does it work? Do you have a joint inbox and separate inboxes? Do you manage staff individually or together? How does that look like for you guys?
Should I do this one?
Yeah.
So we've always had a joint mailbox. By default, you always have an individual mailbox as well. It tends to be that Rebecca and I are really terrible at checking our individual mailboxes and slightly less terrible at keeping on top of the email that goes into the joint mailbox. But basically, in practical terms, we try to operate as one seamless unit, as covering as much of the job as we can. So that's a joint inbox, joint calendar, but also very kind of joined up approach where we don't split up the work. We try to be equally involved in everything over time. The only thing that we do sort of split a little bit is line management responsibility. And what we tend to do there is have a kind of nominated individual line manager who, not so much for task management, because for work stuff we're involved in everything, but for kind of development conversations and kind of line management-y type administrative things, then we'll have one point of contact. But what we've tended to do as well is sort of do that for a year and then swap, so that individuals in our team get the benefit of our different kind of styles and insights as we line manage them.
It's just worth saying as well on the model, we're always trying to do what's best for the team, and so that's why we've kind of landed on this model where we share everything, so that the team have kind of a continuous service, if you like, so they can come to any one of us. And it's good to hear Shade at the beginning saying that she felt like that worked. But obviously for an individual, when it comes to line management, that's probably doesn't provide that consistency, and that's not the best for the individual, which is why we'll split that, so that we can kind of give them the best support that they need, and have those bit more kind of in-depth and confidential conversations you might have with a line manager about your development, etc.
I actually remember, I don't know if you remember this, Rebecca, but when we first started job sharing, we kind of looked up a few job shares, and there was this one job share that was like kind of like the model job share that everyone thought of in the department. So we went and we talked to them about what works. And they said they felt it was really important to have this kind of seamless approach. So it'd been like neutral through the week. It wouldn't matter who people got to speak to. And we tried to sort of model ourselves on them a little bit. Well, I think they had a bit of a strange handover note thing, as far as I can remember. Was it them that had an Excel file or something? I don't know. Anyway, someone had an Excel file. I don't.
Yeah, I do
an
remember.
Excel file work.
I think they also talk to each other on the other one's day off, which we always try not to do that, because the reason we're in the job share is we're working part-time, is so that we do have that time away outside the office. So we do try to respect and set some kind of clear boundaries as well. So like you said about like Tammy, one of the things that makes it work is communication, and that's, you can't communicate enough, but obviously you've got to have really clear boundaries in place as well.
And honestly, it works so seamlessly, and you're kind of saying it's a little bit more extra work for you with all the handover notes, but being kind of managed by you, it really felt like doesn't matter who you talk to, because both of you know exactly the same amount of what's going on. So I can definitely say that's worked really well. So you've spoken a lot about the positive things about a job share, but what are some of the trickier things? So what do you do if you don't agree, for instance, on a direction?
Do you want me to start this one?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that much, I'm pleased to say, but we made a decision quite early on to talk about things between ourselves, and then go to the team or go to an individual with a single position. So if I know I've made a steer or given an opinion or something that Tammy won't agree with, I'll put it in my handover note and say, I've done this, shall we talk about it? And then when we do our catch up, so our catch up time is really, really important on our handover day. We'll kind of go through and go, okay, what do we think is the right thing to do here? And we might have different views, but you know, through that kind of discussion, you can kind of find a way through, and we go back and go, we've discussed it. We think maybe we should kind of take this course of action, or can you just, you know, do what you were doing, but also, you know, do X, Y, Z. So we try to approach it in quite a mature, pragmatic way, and we're broadly aligned with our kind of core values and objectives of what we want to get out of the roles that we're in, the way we work, which minimizes the extent that it happens. And yeah, make sure that we're not going in team meetings and just, one of us is saying is, we will challenge each other openly, absolutely, but it'd be really difficult for the team to kind of know where they stand if that was happening all the time. So yeah, to try and work out what our position on things is as much as possible. And over time, when you get to know someone, you get to know the policy area that you're working on, it becomes just more easier and easier, because you know what positions are on things anyway. So it tends to happen less and less, I think. Anything to add, Tammy?
Not really. I mean, I think occasionally, I agree, it rarely happens that someone takes a decision and then the other one sort of comes in and finds something they want to unwind. I think sometimes, occasionally, there's sort of something where Rebecca or I know that we might disagree, and then we will probably try and just hold off, like just postpone a little bit so that we can touch base and just kind of find a common ground or like agree, actually, yeah, that's fine. So there may be occasionally things that just where the decision just like hangs on a little bit, so we've got a chance to confirm with one another, but it doesn't happen that often.
Thank you. And kind of moving to kind of how to find a job share partner, what's kind of your tips on this? Would you apply for a job first, like you did, Tammy, and then hope that you get a good partner? Do you get a say in who that partner is if you do it that way? Or would you go down the route of finding someone that you want to job share with first and then applying for a job?
So if it's possible, I would try and find someone first. And as we've both said, if you're interested in job sharing, I would just always have your eyes open. Just kind of, who do you work well with? Who do you see that you really respect and you think they'd make a good job share partner? Just have your eyes open, like really long term, even if you think it's a few years down the line when you might want to do it. I was actually in the situation, so when Rebecca went on maternity leave the second time, our boss left, our deputy director, and so I was in a situation where I didn't have a job share partner. I was thinking, oh, I kind of felt not ready, but I was like, shall I apply for this DD role? Went and had a conversation with the recruiting director, and I was basically trying to get out of it. I was like, well, I'd really love to do this job. It would be great, but I haven't got a job share partner to apply with, so I'm not going to apply. And he was really, really super encouraging and just sort of like, well, just apply, let's see what happens. And so that actually happened twice, because I couldn't persuade Rebecca to apply for it when it came up permanently the first time either. So the first time, the director just sort of like put me in a partnership with a full-time person. And actually, it's a bit of an interesting example, because this was someone that I wasn't really sure, was this going to work? We hadn't worked together absolutely brilliantly when we'd both been grade 6s, because we hadn't I think the thing that had been missing was that kind of all-in attitude of mutual support. But when we then became a partnership, we both just did that, and it actually did work great. But the second time, when the job came up permanently, I tried to find someone to apply with. I did actually find someone, but then they didn't get through the process. And then I was matched back again with this full-time person until Rebecca eventually came round and came to join me again as a job share partnership. But my experience of trying to find someone to apply with, it was quite difficult. It's quite difficult to just sort of go out there. I think there is a job share, a civil service job share, I want to say dating arrangement, but like some kind of platform for finding job share partnerships. I never actually tried to use it, and I was always quite nervous of just kind of going out into the unknown, having 2 conversations with someone and then starting to work with them. But I think it's just, I was really lucky the first time that Rebecca, you know, it was just the perfect moment for her. She was up for this job. We already knew each other a little bit. I think we were really lucky. The next time it didn't really work out like that. I couldn't find another part-timer to job share with. But I was again lucky that the director was willing to kind of pay a bit more to put the full-time and the part-time role together. So I think it's just, yeah, keeping your eyes open all the time, try and find someone who's kind of up for the same stuff that you're up for. You're in relatively kind of similar stages of the career, you complement one another, you think you'll work well. That's my advice, really. And maybe, you know, the other people on this call might be a good pool of people who are interested. Just getting to know people a little bit, and yeah, hopefully you find someone or several people that that you could apply for something with.
Thank you, Tammy. And I think you've answered actually multiple posts with that answer as well. Really helpful. And do you know if in the civil service, is there a requirement to always consider if a job can be done by a job share? So if you reach out to a recruiter, that they would always have to take that request quite seriously?
I think on the job ads, it quite often says open to, I think the default civil service job ad is something like open to full-time, part-time, or job share. So I think a recruiter has to have a reason to not put that on, and if they've put that on, then they'd have to consider it. You'd probably need to speak to an HR lawyer to get a proper answer on that, but I think generally things kind of will state that they're open to that, unless they've got good reason not to be.
Yeah, I think that's how it works. But yeah, we'll maybe get a lawyer on here sometime that can answer these questions. You've already talked a bit about how you divide tasks, that you both do everything, but when it comes to line management, you make sure that you kind of split that up a bit. And also how you deal with conflict and when you don't agree with each other. There's a question here, if you think you can job share with someone in a different location, so you're not actually ever working in the same physical office. Do you think that would be possible?
I guess so. Over COVID, I guess that kind of happened a little bit. So we've had a little bit of test of that, and it worked. It worked fine. I think you do need to have those kind of regular face-to-face touch points so that you really kind of get to bond with that person really, and get to know them, which is, you know, you can do that virtually to some extent, but there's something kind of special about actually meeting someone in person, and quite regularly. So I think it can probably work. I think it'd be a bit harder, and I guess you just have to think about the team. If you're going into it as a manager, how you're managing your team and where they're located, and I'd probably look out for where you're seeing that happening and speak to those people and see how they're finding. I guess the general theme of this is just go and speak to loads and loads of job shares. If you're interested, go, oh, can I just have half an hour and just see how it's working for you? Because there's so many different models and so many different ways it's working. So probably if you absolutely wanted to make it work, it could, but I imagine it would be a bit harder, and you would definitely need to try and make the effort to try and meet up face to face, fairly, not saying every week, but on a fairly regular basis.
Thank you, Rebecca. There's one final question in the chat. So if you have any other questions, please pop them in chat now. Just to say, do you think it's better if your job share is in a similar career stage? So if you are thinking of going for a grade 6 for the first time, should you find someone in the same situation, or should you go with an existing grade 6? I know, Rebecca, you kind of were in a similar situation the first time. Would you recommend that as a good way of doing it?
I mean, it's definitely a great way of doing it because you're going in with kind of similar aspirations for the job. And I think this probably gives your career longevity. I mean, your partnership longevity. Obviously, if one of you has been a certain grade for a long time, is thinking about going for promotion, and you're not quite ready, but then that's fine. You don't have to go into a job share thinking about this is going to be a 7-year arrangement. It can be this, I'm going into job share and for 2 years and then see what happens. So you know, you're not marrying someone. It's not like a lifetime commitment. And sorry, Tammy. Although we are kind of
sometimes feel like we do have a bit of a job
Yeah.
share marriage.
So I you know, Tammy, so when we first got together, you know, we're both kind of new to the grade 6 grade and you know, similar kind of career trajectories. Then when I did go on maternity leave, Tammy was in a grade 5 role, so doing the DD role, and it was a couple of years until I came back and started working with Tammy again. So I was then ready to go for deputy director at that point. There wasn't just like, you know, life stuff going on. I just didn't feel like I was able kind of mentally and emotionally to kind of take that step up. But when I did, it was then fantastic to be with someone who already knew what they were doing at that grade. And you know, I said at the beginning, you get to learn so much from your job share partner. So if there is that where you're at different stages, it's a really great opportunity to learn from each other as well. So absolutely can work. I wouldn't like say that that should hold you back at all. But just, you know, just be cognizant that there are those different kind of career goals that you might have, and you know, just be open with that when you're kind of talking about what you want to get out of the post, because you might, you know, it might be something that's got to work for 2 years and then see where you are, rather than seeing it as a long-term arrangement.
Thank you so much. Any final words from either of you before I go in to close the session?
Just really, if you're thinking about doing it, just really encourage you. It's a bit of work to find someone to work with and to make the job share partnership work. I think we're sort of joking about being married, but it is a little bit like a marriage or a relationship where you have to kind of invest in you have to find someone who's right for you. You have to invest in the relationship to make it work. And then you have like all the stuff that life throws at you to deal with while you're doing it together. But it's really worth that. I mean, for me, it's just been kind of transformative for my career and my enjoyment of my work and my life. So strongly encourage people to kind of put the effort in if they think it might be something that's right for them. And so normal in the civil service now. There are so many job share partnerships that you know, you might get a line manager who hasn't recruited a job share partnership before, but they're not going to be kind of like, oh, what's this weird thing? They're going to sort of, you know, ask someone, oh, what did you do when you recruited that job share partnership? Because there's so many around, and it's great. It's great. You know, there are a few role models, and I feel like really happy to be able to be a role model to others who are thinking about doing it. Yeah. So thanks everyone for being here and your interest today.
Yeah. And just to like wholeheartedly agree with everything Tammy just said, and be open-minded, go for it, kind of, you know, not having too high expectations, but like hoping that it can work and really trying to, you know, make it work. And you know, if it's something that's of interest to you, I just really encourage you to try and pursue it. There's so many benefits from it, from a career perspective, from a personal perspective as well, and it's really worth the effort. So good luck to you all, if you are, or to those that are thinking of doing it, and very happy to kind of talk to anyone that you know would be more interested in finding out more outside of this call.
Thank you so much. If anyone ever gets the chance to work with Tammy and Rebecca, take it. I learned so much from them, having them as my manager. It was fantastic.